Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Roslyn Hill Chapel, a spiritual home for open minds. I'm Sally Somerville, a chapel member and your worship assistant for this Unitarian service. Whoever you are and however you are this morning, there is a space here for you. We have a children's chapel and creche today for children aged 2 and above. Babies under 2 are welcome in the creche, but need to be accompanied by an adult. With government restrictions lifted, precautions such as hand sanitation, distancing, and masks are now a matter of personal choice. Do join us for refreshments at the back of the chapel after the service. If you're watching at home, you can join us for tea and conversation in the virtual side aisle at midday. The Zoom link was sent out in our weekly update email and is in the Connect link in the YouTube description. This afternoon, we have our monthly Death Cafe from 2 until 4, talking about end-of-life matters over tea and cake. This evening, we will be transported into a state of relaxation with music and meditation at 7 p.m. You can find information about these and all our activities on our website. If you prefer a paper copy, you can pick up our Open Mind newsletter. The new April edition is now available from the steward's table. Our good cause for this month is the British Red Cross and DEC emergency appeal for Ukraine. We will divide our collection between the upkeep of our chapel and this very worthy cause. You can make your donation in cash or card at the back of the chapel after the service, or donate online. This morning, we're lighting the chalice, the symbol of our liberal faith, with words by Reverend A. Powell Davis, which we have adapted. So far as I can see, all the great leaders and the great exemplars of religion possessed faith in life's essence, in its hidden meaning, in its moral claim, and in the rightness of its inner spiritual guidance. And by this, the great ones lived their lives. There are no problems greater than our power to solve them. There are no burdens greater than our strength. We shape, by every moment of our lives, the great decisions. Then let us venture still, with reason as a lamp to guide us, but lighted with the light of faith.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Reverend Kate Dean. I'm proud to serve as the minister for this beautiful and sacred place. We come together as a spiritual community and we like to get to know one another, but before we welcome each other, I just wanted to mark today as Mother's Day. And in order to do that, I'd like to share this reading from the fantastically named Unitarian minister W. Waldemar W. Argo, who preached in the early 20th century, and it's dedicated to mothers and fathers and all those who nurture. We are your children. Out of the infinite we have come to you, and through you. We are the old yet ever new miracle of incarnation. Give us a chance to grow within the warmth of your unfailing love, into souls sensitive to beauty, hearts open to love, and hungry for the imperishable values of life. And so let us now turn to someone near you to say your name, and please welcome them to chapel this morning. So let us continue those conversations over tea after the service. But now let us sing our first hymn. It's in your green hymn book, hymn number 246, Morning So Fair to See. Hymn number 246. Now, I have a story for all ages, but I think children can stay in their seats for this one. I think it's a story you've all heard before, but this version is a modern telling. It's from the Gospel of John, but the version is the Message, and it's called Bread and Fish for All. After this, Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. Some call it Tiberias. A huge crowd followed him, attracted by miracles they had seen him do amongst the sick. When he got to the other side, he climbed a hill and sat down, surrounded by his disciples. It was nearly time for the feast of Passover, kept annually by the Jews. When Jesus looked out and saw the large crowd had arrived, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread to feed these people?" He said this to stretch Philip's faith. He already knew what he was going to do. Philip answered, 200 silver pieces wouldn't be enough to buy bread for each person to get a piece. One of the disciples, it was Andrew, brother to Simon Peter, said, "There's a little boy here, and he has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But that's a drop in the bucket for a crowd like this." Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was a nice carpet of green grass in this place. They sat down, about 5,000 of them. Then Jesus took the bread, and having given thanks and blessed it, he gave it to those who were seated. And he did the same with the fish. All ate as much as they wanted. When the people had eaten their fill, he said to the disciples, "Gather up the leftovers so nothing is wasted." They went to work and filled 12 large baskets with leftovers from the 5 barley loaves. The people realized that God was at work among them in what Jesus had just done. They said, "This is the prophet for sure, God's prophet right here in Galilee." And Jesus saw in their enthusiasm that they were about to grab him and make him king, so he slipped off and went back up the mountain to be with himself. Now, this story from the New Testament of the Bible could be seen as a miracle. How did they manage to feed all those 5,000 people just with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes? But we could see it in another way. These people all came together and they tried to help one another. We could think that even though they were sitting waiting for someone else to feed them, when they heard Jesus' words, how we should treat each other as we would wish to be treated, maybe they rifled around in their pockets and they found an old crust of bread that they could share. They might have found some fish in the bottom of a bag that they could share. And amazingly, everyone got fed. They all had the faith and the love, and they shared it amongst each other. And so with that, we say goodbye to our children, our child at the back, Lilibet, and other children who are up in the hall at the moment, to enjoy your Children's Chapel Bright Lights activities. Let's sing the children out now.
Of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Now, we have all witnessed the distressing war raging in Ukraine, where innocent people are fighting for their lives. And we know that people of that country will need our support, no matter the outcome. The chapel has a history of supporting refugees during times of conflict, and we have re-established our social action group to work on projects related to social justice concerns. So if you'd like to take part in this group, please do get in touch with me. Also, there is a friend of the chapel, Robin, who's contacted me as he's working to match Ukrainian refugees with sponsors in the local area of Hampstead and Highgate. So if you have applied for the Homes for Ukraine scheme and want to help, please also let me know. Unitarians across the country have responded with offers of prayer, and so now let us gather in prayer and fellowship with Unitarian communities and people of good faith throughout the world. This is a prayer in the time of war for Ukraine by Reverend Cliff Reed. For the people suffering under aggression and unjust war, we ask the strength and the endurance to prevail. And may we find wise ways to help them do so. For the aggressor and the tyrant, we ask the grace of utter defeat, that they may learn humility and be freed from the folly of their arrogance, their inhumanity, and their criminal ways. For the human instruments of the oppressor and the warmonger, those fooled or forced into the commission of evil deeds, we ask the insight to see the wickedness and illegitimacy of their master's orders, and the courage to disobey them. For ourselves and all humanity, we ask for the impulse to be kind, to be generous to those driven from their homes and homelands, those in desperate need of welcome, food and shelter, for those seeking refuge from the scourge of war, those cruelly touched by violence inflicted on them without valid reason or just cause. For us all, we ask for the love to heal all enmity and for the wisdom to bring us, weak and sinful as we are, to the way of peace with justice. May it be so. Amen. And if you are holding someone in your heart this morning, I now invite you to say their name aloud in the coming moments of stillness, so that we may also hold them in our prayers this morning. Spirit of life and love, God of our hearts, we give thanks for those who bring us joy, and we pray for the safekeeping of those whom we hold in concern. For all those names, spoken and those left unsaid, may they be surrounded by the loving kindness we offer them today. Blessed be, and amen. Now let us sing once again from your green hymnal, number 43, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, number 43. Our reading today is by the Unitarian Universalist Adam Lawrence Dyer. His poetry is informed by his multicultural background and work as an LGBT activist. And it's called Adrift in my faith. I say sometimes I am adrift in my faith, all at sea. I must remind myself that not only can I swim, but I can read the sun and the moon. I know the smell of the storm on the horizon and the buzz of the fly that says, "Land ho!" I am adrift, and I am near the shore of my parents or my ancestors, shadowy figures from books whose battered and used up bodies managed to lift me above the waves, to breathe the sweet sea air. The waves will rise as high as my brow. I am able to hold my breath until they ebb, and I can breathe in the sun again. I am adrift, all around me an ocean. I am a land creature by nature. I have no gills or scales, and my blood is warm. This ocean could consume me with its temperature, its toxicity, asphyxiating, dehydrating. It is not my natural element, but it is beautiful and enticing. And an endless plain of silken ultramarine, peaked in white lace. It enfolds me every so often in an embrace, and I rest but briefly. I am adrift, and the silken sea water glances across my skin, can send a chill or lap at my neck, much too close despite its vast expanse. Oh, how I long for the dry land, dry, safe land, placing my feet on terra firma, terra familiar, where I know I can stand and be seen with my face turned up to the sun, saying, "Yes, I know I am not a fish. I am not the other. I am human and I can swim." So I am adrift, held aloft by my forebears, standing above the waves, walking on the water. I read the sun in the moon and brace for the storm on the horizon and lead the way home. For I have heard the fly buzz. It is the sound that excites my ear. I can hear, ever so tiny and clear, listen, land ho. We now have a time of meditation, and I will invite Sally to come forward and give the reading slowly. You may like to close your eyes for this.
By Leslie Hoover Fales. All that we have been, all that we will become. All that we have been separately, and all that we will become together, is stretched out before and behind us, like stars scattered across a canvas of sky. We stand at the precipice, arms locked together like tandem skydivers, working up the courage to jump. Tell me, friends, what have we got to lose? Our fear of failure, our mistrust of our own talents. What have we got to lose? A poverty of the spirit, the lie that we are alone. What wonders await us in the space between the first leap and the moment our feet, our wheels, however we move our bodies across this precious earth, touch down softly on unknown soil. What have we got to lose that we can't replace with some previously unimaginable joy?
My mum used to love making me birthday cakes when I was younger. I think it was one of her creative outlets at the time. Even though she was juggling life as a shopkeeper and still does, she would always make time for my birthday cake. They could be quite elaborate, like the upright elephant with its bar cake body resting on 4 fat chocolate mini rolls and its trunk made out of half a donut. Another year, it was the island paradise for my Cindy doll, complete with a palm tree, marshmallows for the tree trunk, and Chinese leaves balanced precariously on top. I can imagine she was a bit perplexed the year I asked for a Bible-shaped birthday cake. But she dutifully made it with "In the beginning was the Word" iced on top. I had entered a religious phase, aged 10. I suppose she shouldn't have been that surprised. She chose not to christen me so that I could choose my own religion. And growing up in Somerset, my influences ranged from the neo-pagan conservationists in my family to New Age Glastonburyans just up the road to the storybook Christianity of my village primary school. In adulthood, I could never really give my faith a name until I found the Unitarians. I used to describe myself as spiritual but not religious, before I found out that religion could be like Unitarianism. I think many people describe themselves this way because they have rejected the negative aspects of organized religion. What our Unitarian forefathers and foremothers were striving for, the right to question, the freedom to be uncertain, to wonder about the alternatives, these have become the norm in our secular world. These ideas have developed into the freedom of the individual to follow their own path in general society. But what's even better is when we do it in community with like-minded spiritual seekers who can support us along our way. As the Unitarian minister Cliff Reed, who wrote the Prayer for Ukraine, writes, "Just as religion without spirit is dead, so spirituality without religion slips too easily into self-indulgence and fruitless fantasy. Religion at its best brings people together in loving, testing, sharing community. And spirituality is better when it is shared." We often talk about following our spiritual path, don't we? And we think in terms of life being a journey. But I think it's equally useful to think about our past experiences, religious or otherwise, as the building blocks that make us who we are today. For some of us, our foundations of faith are the solid bricks of childhood religion. But I suspect for many others of us, our foundations are shaped by many different influences. The words of Isaiah can bring comfort to those with strong faith foundations in Judeo-Christian thought. "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Bless you. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." And it has been suggested that some of us are hardwired for faith, to have an unerring belief in something not yet proved. Perhaps it is even an evolutionary advantage for some. It is written in Hebrews, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." When we take a leap of faith, we are putting our trust in something beyond our knowledge, yet somehow based on our lived experience. The peace activist William Sloane Coffin wrote, "I love the recklessness of faith. First you leap, and then you grow wings." Unitarian theology is sometimes referred to as fugitive, difficult to pin down and define. It is perhaps one of the reasons why it's so difficult to promote ourselves in one succinct and snappy strapline. But it's also our strength, our ability to shift and bend and sway, to be inclusive and responsive to the needs of spiritual seekers. Our first reading began, "I say sometimes I am adrift in my faith, all at sea. I must remind myself that not only can I swim, but I can read the sun and the moon. I know the smell of the storm on the horizon and the buzz of the fly that says, 'Land ho!' There are times when we long for dry land, a firm foundation, but perhaps it's more realistic to accept that we are adrift in faith, that as the world shifts and changes, it is better to bend and sway, like the reed in the wind, rather than remain inflexible and at risk of breaking apart. Perhaps this is why some of us are drawn to the wisdom of the mystics from the East and West, Rumi, Kabir, Teresa of Avila, Julian of Norwich, and others. In The Deep Things of God, Essays in Liberal Religion, which was published way back in 1955, the British Unitarian Sidney Spencer wrote, "It is characteristic of the Unitarian movement today that its adherents feel an increasing interest in mysticism. Since we have discarded the belief in miraculous revelation and the final authority of the written word of Scripture, or the creeds of the Church, it is natural that we should find authority where the mystic finds it, in the light of the Spirit shining in illuminated souls." And more recently, the minister of Leeds Unitarians, Reverend Joe James, has spoken of the Spirit and faith. "The Spirit of love is the Spirit we recognize as being between us, not above us, the real presence which we feel and are aware of, not as a remote or an abstract theological idea, but as a physical and earthly reality." When it comes to renewing our faith, one starting point might be to ask, when was the last time you felt close to your whole self? A connection which is hard to define, but one could call it close to God. We could spend hours defining God, but one possibility comes from William Ellery Channing. He wrote, "God is another name for human intelligence, rising above all error and imperfection, and extended to all possible truth." You may agree or disagree, and that is the beauty of being alive, of discovering our common ground and our differences. I once attended a workshop where we were asked to take a personality test. There were a few questions that we answered and then were given a number. And I was convinced that most people surely would describe themselves as I did, number 7, of course. We were asked to get into groups according to our number. So I moved to my corner of the room, expecting everyone else to follow me. Imagine my surprise when only a handful of people joined my group, number 7. And the rest were pretty much evenly distributed amongst the other groups. The lesson was not how to be a better number 7. It was to recognize that not everyone thinks like me. And so I ask you again, when do you feel most connected to this source of ultimate truth that some call God? Perhaps it is when you're sharing a deep conversation with a loving friend, helping them through a tough time, or delighting in their joyful news. Or maybe it's when you're on your own, perhaps in a place which shows nature off at its best. Or are you playing with your grandchildren, helping them to learn something new? Or listening to a special piece of music? In our chapel WhatsApp group this week, one member asked for suggestions for uplifting music, and now we have a whole inspiring playlist with a wide variety of musical styles. All these things can bring us closer to our true selves, closer to the divine. As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The highest dwells within us, and there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens. So there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease, and God, the cause, begins." Now, it may seem strange to include at this point the wisdom of the Stoics when talking about indefinable matters of faith. Their principles were based on reasoned inquiry and experiential evidence. Yet, that is a form of faith for some of us. And so I end with two lessons from Marcus Aurelius, taken from The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. In his work Meditations, Aurelius wrote, "My reasoned choice is as indifferent to the reasoned choice of my neighbor as to his breath and his body. However much we've been made for cooperation, the ruling reason in each of us is master of its own affairs. If this weren't the case, the evil in someone else could become my harm, and God didn't mean for someone else to control my misfortune." In a free society, we are responsible for our actions, and in return, we must respect the freedom of others to act according to their conscience, as long as it does not do harm. And another lesson from the Meditations: "Do now what nature demands of you. Get right to it, if that is in your power. Don't look around to see if people will know about it. Don't wait for the perfection of Plato's Republic, but be satisfied with even the smallest step forward and regard the outcome as a small thing." Now, this call to action reminds us what's important is progress, not perfection, and that this can be applied in all areas of our life. Through self-knowledge and awareness of our actions, we can practice our imperfect faith, for only God is really perfect, and bring hope into each other's lives. So I end with the words of the philosopher Alan Watts. "To have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water, because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float." And so it is with faith. We should relax and float and trust the water. Blessed be. So now let us have a few moments for the words to settle, and you may want to close your eyes to just reflect on those questions in your own mind and in your own hearts. I do hope we'll have time to share our reflections over tea after the service. But for now, let us sing our final hymn. It's hymn number 75, God of Ages and of Nations. Hymn number 75. God of our hearts, as we depart and take our homeward way, may faith sustain and guide us, that in our hearts a greater love shall be, a bond of fellowship and joy. Blessed be. Please be seated.
thank you to everyone involved in getting today's service ready for all of us and for people online. Thank you, John, for the lovely choices of music. Thank you, Kate, for this wonderful readings and reflections. And thank you for the tea people, the hospitality people, the stewards, and everyone. And thank you for coming. Join us for tea in the side aisle at the bottom of the church.
Just a brief reminder that the collection basket is at the back of the chapel where you get your tea, and that the Death Cafe is at 2 p.m. if you'd like to join us. Thank you.